when I left and came to Bayside, I started the gallery there, and one of the first things you do when you're looking at exhibition programs and public programs is actually think about who your residents are, the people who will be coming, and you look at the statistics, and the statistics clearly showed that there's an ageing population within Bayside. It's also very monocultural, and it's also very well serviced for young people, teenagers. Around about 18 they all leave. They come back in their 40s when they can afford to buy a house in the area. I'm sure you all know where it is, 17 kilometres, a beautiful coastline from Brighton down through to Beaumaris. And strangely enough, it's not a wealthy council because it has no manufacturing base, no big shopping centres, so we actually run on a very, very small budget and 1.9 staff, which is... Originally it was Bodleian and myself, and then when I took on the coordinator position, Elle came along to backfill that. So when I was looking at the statistics and saw that we've got double the greater Melbourne average of people over the age of 75, clearly there was going to be an incidence of dementia. And as I said when I was working at that other place, there was a day centre not too far away, and I did love working there, I really did. But there was a day centre not too far away which my sister worked in, so she used to bring the people up on a regular basis, probably about once a month, and I used to observe them and I would see that they were actually not connecting with the work in any way. They were trying to connect with the work, but they weren't given the time, and I don't think it was anything to do with the carers. It was just simply that we didn't really know what to do for them. So I started investigating and found that MoMA actually had a program called Meet Me at MoMA, and then I found that the National Gallery of Australia had one as well, their Art and Alzheimer's program. And by this stage I'd moved on to Bayside and, as I said, looked at the statistics and thought, okay, this is the way to do it. So in the very first year, when we got the gallery up and running, there was a little bit of time towards the end of that we thought, okay, talking to the other 0.9 of the staff, would we have a go at doing this? And of course, being local government, I had to write a business case. So I think I got to 1.5 sentences and just thought, this is crap. You know, no one's going to believe that we can do this if I put a business case up. So I just deleted that and went ahead with it. Contacted the NGA and talked to Adrienne Bogue there, who's quite a remarkable woman. Unfortunately, they'd just lost all their funding for doing the outreach program. So we had no way of getting funding because our budget, as I said, very small, getting towards the end of the financial year, first year of operation, used up everything. So I started hawking the idea around to everyone. It's a very difficult idea to actually explain to people. I will go through and explain how it works. But what we found was that no one was prepared to give us money. Aged and Disability thought it was about art therapy. I kept saying it's not art therapy. We're not providing art classes. This is completely different. And then I realised that it's legislated in state government that all councils have a health and wellbeing plan, and then you have a health planner. So I went off to the health planner, who just happened to have $1,500, and she paid for Adrienne and Sally to come down and do the training, which was wonderful. So we had the 2-day training, which we offered to healthcare workers, people who home cared or people who were working in a facility, and to people in the art world, which not too many people actually came along, which was a bit sad. They were mostly healthcare workers. But we had a great day, well, 2 days, but we had to organise very quickly to get a group of people in who had dementia, and that was difficult because of this program not being easily explainable to people. So I actually might just show what we do, and that might make things a little bit easier. But this was really our first step towards doing a socially inclusive art and dementia program. So we'll see if this... So that's really what we're aiming to do when we do this. So it's not necessarily talking about the art. I put that right at the bottom because that's really what you'll find is that you don't talk about the art a lot, but it's about giving these people the opportunity to experience some intellectual stimulation, make connections with their personal stories, and you'll often find that they will do that. The artwork will draw that out. They access these personal experiences and their long-term memories. You'll find their short-term memories very often aren't great. It depends. We've had some very low-functioning people right through to some quite high-functioning people, and some who just go to sleep, which is fine. You know, that's quite okay. And this, by participating in this activity, this fosters some form of personal growth. And of course, we have absolutely no way of recording that or suggesting that that actually happens. But all we see is a group of people who, after a couple of weeks, are so happy to get off the bus and get into the gallery that it's quite remarkable. It really is. And as I said, the last thing is about exploring the ideas. Now, being people who are living with dementia, we had a little bit of trouble getting some images, so we have a rather an odd selection of images here because we have permission to use these. But this is just an example of how it works. So we have 2 staff members, one at either end. You have the 4 people in the middle. You look at 3 artworks over a period of about an hour, and you just sit there and you have long silences. And for those of us who are trained to give a talk for 40 minutes and talk about the art, the artist, everything, suddenly you're faced with silences. And those silences work extremely well. They're a really, really important part of the actual process. And sometimes there are no silences because you might have a group who just want to talk all the time. And sometimes you have a person who just speaks in Greek constantly and then tells you how hard it is to put 5 Olympic pools on the top of your car. And you just go with it. You just completely go with it. I mean, it's a great concept when I was actually thinking about fire. It would have been really hard. So this was during an exhibition called Dances with Wools, and all the artwork that was in it was artists used wool, but we had a community aspect to it as well. So there wasn't a great deal of art in it. There was a massive installation created by the local school and really didn't work terribly well. Conversations here were around that would have been hard to knit. You couldn't explain to them it was hand knitted, it was machine knitted because that didn't mean anything to people. But then they saw dogs in it, so we just had this huge discussion that went on for nearly 20 minutes about the different types of dogs that were actually in that particular artwork, which I thought was really interesting. That's by Kate Just, and it's called Boundary Love, and it's a wonderful work. Now, we are touching an artwork here, but that actually belongs to me. Now, that Iriana Kanelopoulou's work was also in the exhibition. And once again, too complex to explain to people why this is ceramic when it looks like it's a knitted item, which is where it starts from. And even though I went to her artist talk, I still don't understand how she transforms them from that into ceramics, but she does. So there was a lot of discussion about toys and knitting and all sorts of things with this. It was really much more interesting than I thought it would be. Now, this is where things start to go a little bit pear-shaped when you've got a small gallery. We have 2 gallery spaces, but in the other gallery space, we didn't have work that was appropriate, or we deemed to be appropriate. We deemed that a landscape would be nice for them. Well, they were bored out of their brains. They were so bored, we got nowhere, and the silences became worse and worse and worse. Okay, right, well, that clearly just doesn't work, because these were a very vibrant group, these ones. They were quite high-functioning. So this is the other aspect of Dances with Wools, where anyone could knit a piece of food of any sort. And that actual work in the foreground there that you can see, not the big bottle, but the cheese platter behind it, was actually made by a group of people from one of the care facilities. They workshopped what they wanted to make, and they did a cheese platter with wine glasses and gherkins and slices of cucumber and all sorts of things. So this was pretty good fun, this one. But one thing I noticed with this too, when we help them get on and off the bus, we've now got 1 volunteer, which is fantastic, because that's another thing that the National Gallery of Australia doesn't have to worry about, is security and who's going to help people in and out and move the chairs and so forth. So we have to think about that sort of thing very carefully, because it is run during opening hours, because you don't want to marginalise them any further. So it's really important that you do that. But when these 2 were left behind, when the other 2 were taken out to the bus, and then some other people came in and started interacting with them, and I thought, this is extraordinary. This is probably the first time they've had a public conversation where their illness is not seen, because no one would have known that they were unwell. And that was just fantastic, and that sort of makes you feel that it's very, very much what it all should be about. So it's really, you've got to watch that nonverbal communication. That's a really, really crucial part of it, because if they're not speaking, we did have one fellow who for 3 weeks didn't say a word, and then we had, I think I might have the work here actually, I'll just flick through to it. No, we haven't. Copyright, it's always copyright. I'll get on to the Ben Quilty in a minute, but this fellow didn't speak at all, and then I noticed he was smiling, and I just said to him, you seem to be enjoying this, and he said, oh, it's great, it's really great. And I don't know whether it meant he felt great or the work was great, or it didn't matter. It was just, and Beau and I looked at each other, and it was just the most extraordinary feeling. It's a bit like, your child's first steps. It was like, wow, we've achieved something. Now, the quilty work, this is interesting because we didn't know how they were going to respond to this, but how they responded to it was by seeing landscape in it. And the area over the right, near where the eye is in the skull, was a nice place to live. That was a really interesting farm. That was where they wanted to be. And over the left-hand side, in a similar position but a little bit lower down, wasn't as nice, it wasn't very fertile, and they didn't really want to farm there. So who knows where that was coming from, but it was a really good conversation. This went on for a good 15 minutes or so, and then one of them said, "Oh, it's two heads." And another one said, "Yes, it's two heads and their chins are touching. They're having a chin wag." And then one of them said they were kissing. And I thought, that's fabulous. And that conversation was started off by, because we never ask questions because they may not be able to actually answer a question, was started off by me saying that the paint here is very thick. And then they talked a little bit about icing and then snow, and then it got onto landscape. Margaret Ollie, the discussion was about whether the oranges were mouldy or not and whether that was an appropriate basket to put them in. So that was pretty interesting too. And also one of the things that one of the participants said was she must have waited till the same time every day to get the same shadows, which I thought was really perceptive. But we found out later that this woman was an artist. She continues to practice where she is cared for, but forgets her paintings, goes about halfway through a painting, never goes back to a painting because it's not hers. She doesn't recognise it when she next sees it. But apparently a very accomplished artist. Oh, this one was an interesting one. He was arrogant, very, very arrogant. And then someone else said, no, he has regrets. He has a number of regrets. And then another one said his pants are undone. So as you can see, you're all laughing. I mean, this is what happens. It's just you have so much fun with these people. You really do. And it's, look, you don't talk a lot about technique. We did with this one in particular because they were fascinated by all the rubbing back, so they were really interested in that. The quilty, they were quite interested in that too, but it is just a little bit too technical and a little bit too obscure to go too much into composition and technique and those sorts of things. This one, no one saw what was actually in there. This was all adjectives that were to do with being fractured and broken and shattered and jagged and words like that, which, once again, very interesting because it was clearly about how they were feeling rather than what the artwork meant to them. And Judy Watson, this was upside down. For everyone, it was upside down. And we couldn't figure out why it was upside down, but then that may have been the way one of them was feeling. And often one of the others will pick up on how the other one's feeling as well. So that's something you have to be very, very aware of, that sometimes they'll even do it because they think that it's the answer that you want to hear too. You'll get a little bit of that they're looking for some sort of validation. We had one woman who kept prefacing everything with, I'm only a silly old fool and I don't know much. A couple of weeks later, she was just right out there with everything she was saying. So it's about trusting in yourself to pick up on what they're saying. It's very much about accepting the fact that there will be silences, accepting the fact that they may not like a work, and if they don't respond, that's fine. You just sit there for a little bit longer. You might get a response. You don't, you move on to the next work. And it's also very much about not assuming anything about these people too, because I think that what we made that mistake in that landscape, and we certainly had difficulty with it. We had a major landscape exhibition at the beginning of the year with Streetons, McCubbins, Roberts, all those sorts of things, and no, it was just too boring for words. We also run out of artwork. I bring in artwork from home, not that I've personally created, but things that I own, and that's rather confronting to have people sitting there just picking your artworks to bits. You know that you've got that. Because the general rule is they want to say whether I would have it on my wall or not. They say, oh no, I wouldn't have that, or I would have that. And all my artworks that I brought in, they didn't like, did they, Ellie? No, they didn't like anything. So that was pretty interesting. But so do you sort of have an understanding now of how it works, that it's really about validation, it's about giving them a voice, it's about making them feel dignified and well regarded, and that anything that they say is acceptable, except for the fellow who just kept talking in Greek. Maybe that one was a little bit too difficult, but it's a really rewarding experience for us. You start off on a real low, you're very, very nervous, but once you get through your first one or two, you actually feel better. By the time you've done 3 or 4, we're now up to, well, it's nearly a year that we've been running it. We do give ourselves a break because we don't have time during installs, obviously. Those weeks, we just have to have a bit of downtime. But it's you wouldn't want to do it on a day you were putting in a funding application because you're emotionally drained once you've done it. But the highs are just extraordinary. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Ellie and let her talk about how we administer the program, because being so small, it can be a bit difficult.
Okay. Thanks, Julie. I'm going to talk more about the running of the program and where we see it going in the future, and things that we've learned over the past 12 months, particularly about operating a program like this within a local government context. It's an unusual beast, local government. So as Julie mentioned, we're a small gallery. We're 1.9 staff and a bit of a hectic exhibition schedule. So we always knew that taking on a program like this was going to be a big commitment and would require a big commitment. But I think it came down to our mission, not just as a gallery, but as an organisation more generally, of inclusivity and accessibility for all. So from the outset, our long-term goal was to open up this program for people living with dementia residing at home and being supported by a carer, so a loved one or something, in a shared activity. So the carer actually participates in the activity with the person that they're caring for. But we knew that building a network of participants for such a new gallery, we're very new to the community. We'd only been open 12 months when we took the training and developed the pilot program. And we were also, our skills were new and we hadn't sort of built that confidence around our own skills yet. So to make sure that we carried the momentum on from the pilot program and that we didn't fall at the first hurdle, we actually partnered with BACC RSL Care Brighton East to deliver 12 months of regular structured visits. And I think that sort of environment of regularity for us enabled us to build our confidence and our skills. And each resident came for 4 weeks, and each group of residents came for 4 weeks, and then we'd have a break, and then another group of residents would come. And it gave us time to learn those skills that Julie was talking about, which for a group of talkers that we are, it was really, really difficult to sort of practice silence and being able to observe body language as well. It also gave us an opportunity to ask questions of the professional carers and to develop a deeper understanding of the struggles and frustrations of people living with dementia and their carers. So we're now at the conclusion of that 12 months of regular structured visits, and we now intend to open up the program for people living with dementia at home with their carers. We think this is a really, really important step, as being a carer can also be an incredibly isolating and frightening journey, particularly when you're caring for a loved one. The ways of communicating and engaging have completely changed. So involving the carers in the program, we hope, will help build new ways of communicating between the person living with dementia and their carer, in turn hopefully extending the net of inclusion to encourage more independent gallery visits, so that net of inclusion's been extended and we may no longer have to facilitate that engagement. So just some things that we've learned over the past 12 months, and maybe some recommendations if you were wanting to start a program similar to this. From the outset, have a really, really clear idea about what you want to achieve. What are your goals? What would a successful program look like? Articulate it. Who's your target audience? And don't be afraid to be really targeted. If there is an area of your community, a segment of your community that is marginalised, target them. You're more likely to be successful if you've got a targeted audience. And really articulate what difference will this program make to your museum or your gallery and to your community. If you can articulate that vision, you're well on your way to a successful program. This is particularly within a local government context, but think laterally and use internal relationships. Use is an awful word, but to leverage support and attract funding. As Julie mentioned, although the costs of running the program once it's up and running are fairly minimal, it's mostly time, but there were some startup costs which needed to be met. So we partnered with our health planner to deliver the NGA workshop, the training workshop, and then also with our disability planner to purchase some new, more comfortable chairs and also an easel to bring works down from the collection, which made it a little bit easier when we were running out of things to show. Familiarise yourself and then align your programs with the actions found in organisational strategies and plans. And for us, that was the council plan, the state government mandated municipal health and wellbeing plan, which Julie mentioned, and also the disability action plan. Aligning yourself with those actions and key result areas in those plans really puts you in a greater position to attract funding and leverage support. And as these strategic plans are relevant organisational wide, you might find that when you request assistance from another department, that can actually, them providing you with assistance can actually assist them in aligning with the strategy as well. So it works for both parties, and the outcome is that you're able to develop a socially inclusive program which benefits the community. Advocate for yourself by any means, both internally and externally. Nominate for industry awards, present at seminars such as this. Let your counsellors, let your exec team, let your board know about what you're doing. You never know. You never know what the support's going to be down the line. Build your support. It might be slow, but keep trying. And understand that the rewards of being socially inclusive are mutually beneficial. To sum up, in our view and from our experience, a successful approach to inclusive public programming involves doing your homework, researching community needs, developing partnerships with both organisations and individuals, developing external and internal support, and most importantly, demonstrating a genuine commitment. This last point is the most vital. For us, with the Connections program, it's more about the journey that we go on with the participants as well. We see it less as delivering a service, but being part of an experience and part of the subsequent reward. So, thank you. We'll leave it there.
Does anyone have any questions for Julie and Ellie? Do you want to come?
Okay. Hi. Ooh, is that on? I know with the Meet Me at MoMA program, they were able to do, I know you mentioned when you're working with the Alzheimer's patients, it's hard obviously to get feedback because they may not remember they've been there. But with a carer, I know with the Meet Me at MoMA program, they have done research later on with the carers about their confidence levels. Do you plan on doing that as well with the...
Yeah, we have done a little bit of that, but it's mostly anecdotal, and it's really, there's no way that they feel that they can actually gauge whether there has been any improvement. But that we've had one regular, what is Jason? Activities...
Lifestyle coordinator.
Lifestyle coordinator. There you go. It's a wonderful title, isn't it? He's a lifestyle coordinator. So he's the one who brings the group that we've had for the last 12 months through, and he said that he does notice a difference in them. What we do is also we give them an image of the work which we laminate, and they take that back with them, and he said that there's still, it helps facilitate discussion that way, but there's actually no real genuine sort of...
I also meant with the carers, I come from a background where I've actually lived with carers who look after loved ones who have Alzheimer's.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you'll do, because I know that with the MoMA program, they found huge benefits for the actual carer and confidence levels and not being as...
No, well, definitely, that's what, we'll look into that, and that will be easy for us once, but we haven't actually worked with people who are home cared yet. As Ellie was saying, that's our next step, because it was just really hard to tap into. We found no one was giving us any support within aged and disability to tap into all these people who were living at home. It was so much easier for us we were very new, but the other thing is that Adrian from the NGA said to us, well, you know, you're crazy because the people who are in a facility are much lower functioning. And it did make, and they don't have people from facilities, they actually only have people who are home cared, so it is actually much easier to run the program with those people. But that's something that we would definitely be able to do. We're very big on getting feedback from everyone who comes through the door if possible. So that would be fabulous to be able to get some feedback. And the carers, as Ellie said, will be a really important part, not just the person living with dementia, but the carers will be in the new model, really important part of the program. Yeah.
Thank you.